Right, there we go. We're live on TikTok and we're live on the old YouTube. Right. So
Hi. Can everyone hear us? Can you hear me? That's amazing.
yeah, I think we need this sort of clarification that we have audio from both sides because you didn't hear about my members only live on Monday. I was speaking for
Mhm.
half an hour. Hi, Hannah.
Yeah.
Half an hour before anyone spoke up and said they couldn't hear me.
All
So,
right. It's the opposite of my channel. My channel can't wait to tell me that they can't hear me.
if anyone can tell us, can they hear both myself and Philip? We're doing really well, Hannah. We're just about to do a wee talk on the O'Neills, or the origins of the
Mm.
O'Neills. Can you hear Philip okay? Yes, you can. Midnight, LaFay. Thank you very much. That's perfect.
Hi.
Okay, so
Definitely a delay on my side.
first off, perfect. Thank you, Hannah. So, first off, let me introduce you to my good friend here, Philip, who
Hi.
who runs the channel, the YouTube channel Irish Medieval History. Um,
Oh, hi.
Myself and Philip have been working together for on YouTube for about 4 years, but we've known each other a lot longer, and
Mm.
that's why I'm grey, going grey. So, but if you want to learn anything to do with Irish medieval history, you need to be subscribed to his channel because although I do sort of surnames and areas, and the areas of these surnames, he would go more into depth about what is happening within those areas and the kings and the politics and just the all round tomfoolery. So we he's the channel to go to. I
Mm.
should have really made a nice little where on my TikTok I have like my channel, but
Hi.
I didn't make one for you. You're not important enough. He is right. So we're just gonna do the O'Neill, the O'Neills, and I'm just gonna sort of go off with my wee spiel here, and I can't even remember what my first slide was. Okay, yeah, right, that's fine. Um, I'm gonna stick that there. Okay, so Philip's just gonna have to sit here and listen to me waffle for about 10 minutes while I break this all in. So, um, how many have we got? We've got a good enough number here to start. There's 50 of you on, 60 of you on TikTok, so we'll
Mm.
start there. So, the emergence of the Uí Néill. The abbot Mercu, who wrote the Life of Saint Patrick in about the year 700, describes and celebrates the
Mm.
historical, pseudo-historical figure known as Niall of the Nine Hostages, as one of as one of the progenitors of almost all the royal houses in Ulster. In fact, he sort of goes on to describe it as the entire Ireland. It is an exaggeration, but it sums up the contemporary reality of Mercu's day, when so many of the dominant lineages in at least the northern half of Ireland seem to trace themselves back to Niall. Assuming he was a real person, Niall may have lived in the 5th century and is said to have descended from Conn of the Hundred Battles, who is believed to have lived 7 generations before Niall in the late Iron Age. Conn is much less likely to be a historical figure, but the theory was that Conn gave his name to the people called the Connacht, and they're remembered in the name of the province Connacht. And it does seem quite likely that Niall's kin originated from west of the Shannon. The genealogies depict Niall as the father of more than a dozen sons, each of whom went on to found a lineage. Let me get the old picture here. There you go. To give you some context on some of these. Went on to found a dozen lineages. It is likely that many so-called Uí Néill lineages were nothing more than propaganda, as the Uí Néill advanced into these clans areas, and they looked to cozy up to the Uí Néill. And here are some of the surnames associated with the descendants of the Uí Néill. Murchú says that when Patrick came to minister Ireland in the 5th century, Niall's son Logair was emperor of the barbarians ruling in Tara, which was the capital of the Irish. But he was writing more than 200 years after these events. And his work is not a work of history, but a hagiography and an ecclesiastical propaganda. I can never get that word out. The most we can say, ecclesiastical. I can never get that word out.
I stopped. There's a rake of them I keep tripping over.
The most we can say for certain is that the basic framework of the northern and southern Uí Néill dynasties was can be placed in the 6th century, at which point they were certainly attempting to stake a claim on Tara, and that they have made the kingship fully their own by the middle years of the following century. The title King of Tara having been appropriated, it came to be used as an honorific title attached to the highest ranking king amongst the Uí Néill. Then for a period of a quarter of a millennium, from the reign of, hang on, let me get you another wee slide here, and I get Philip back. For a period of quarter millennium, from the reign of Uí Néill until the ascension of Míle Seachtanal II in 980, the title King of Tara alternated, with only one exception, between the northern and southern Uí Néill. When Uí Néill of the northern Uí Néill died in 743, the title King of Tara did not go to his northern successor, but instead to a dynast of the southern Uí Néill, Domhnall or Mead. And then after his death in 763, the northern leader Niall Forsac, who died in 778, obtained the title after a southern Uí Néill dynast Donecha died in 797, and so on and so on. The southern Uí Néill is only a convenient shorthand for what were a number of competing dynasties, all claiming descent from Niall of the Nine Hostages, which occupied a broad area of territory stretching from there you go. Next slide, please. A broad area stretching from northeast Connacht to just north of Dublin, with their hub in the present-day counties of Meath and Westmeath. But I'm sure if there's enough of you interested in all that, myself and Philip will cover them in another video. The northern Uí Néill, the success. I can't keep. I should have got you to push the slides. Just go like.
What's this?
No, I should have got you.
The Discord, was it?
No, it's on just.
I'm watching actually on YouTube right now. Everyone else.
The success of the. Hang on, I'll just get on for the rest of the introduction, and we can just waffle. So the success of the sons of the of Niall in conquering the Midlands is said to have been matched by a similar expansion into the northwest, although there's little or no contemporary evidence for the expansion from Connacht, and this has been questioned. According to later traditions, however, two of Niall's sons became the ancestors of the Kin O'Connell, which is the kindred O'Connell, whose territory was Tyrconnell in present-day County Donegal, and the other was Owen, whose name is preserved in Inishowen in Donegal, and Tyrone or Tyr Owen, land of Owen, home of the descendants of the Killen Owen. Both groups, and for their less successful cousins, we use the term Northern Uí Néill as a shorthand. The paramount king among them bore the title King of the North, or Rí Ind Focle. They apparently gained their foothold first in Donegal, from which they began to expand eastwards into the province, previously the domain of the people called the Ullid and the Airchiela. Kin O'Connell dominated at first, but after Uí Néill of the Kinalowen secured the overkingship of the Uí Néill in 734, there began a long rotation of the kingship of Tara between his branch and the northern Uí Néill and the southern Uí Néill, with the results that the Kin O'Connell's power declined and they remained confined to their Donegal homeland. At first based in the northeast corner of Donegal, with their headquarters at the Great Fort at the entrance of an Inishowen peninsula known as Uí Néill. Hence the ruler was often called Rí Éileach, or King of Éileach. They pushed eastwards across the Foyle into what is now County Derry, and then south into what became Tyrone, And while they might claim to be kings of Ailech, their royal inauguration site was actually Tullyhogue, near Dungannon. We'll just skip past so much of that. I forgot how much notes I wrote on this. just going
just
through.
A wee bit.
Yeah, no,
it's good stuff though.
Yeah, well, maybe I'll save it. I'll save the rest of that for a video. But
well, yeah, that's a good idea as well.
They would use the Church of Armagh as they expanded and pushed Uí further east. They would take over Armagh, and they would use the church to bolster their position. But it wasn't just also church propaganda that helped them secure their position. They were also very politically astute and great martial prowess. Such as Uí Allen again in 743, who managed to secure the exclusion of the Kin O'Connell from the overkingship of the Northern Uí Néill, and he beat the Ullid at the Battle of Farquhar in 735, and he also beat the Leinstermen at Ballyshannon in 738. Uí Allen's nephew, also called Uí, who died in 819, also had successful campaigns against the Ullid, Southern Uí Néill and Leinster. In fact, he deposed the King of Leinster, who was head of one of the three main lineages of the dynasty, the Uí Dúnlaigh, who the MacMurroghs. Any of you are MacMurroghs? That's one of the king groups you descend from. We can see that their early history is steeped in a bit of mystery, a bit of propaganda, a bit of martial prowess, and some political manoeuvring. And it's from here we'll start the beginning at looking at the Uí Néill and eventually the O'Neills. If I can get a wee slide here, and get Philip back up again. Right, with Philip today, and I thought we'd maybe start with the father of Niall Glundov, Iad Finlayth, who died in 879. So he's
879.
I can start us off, and we can get. So he's king right around the time when the Vikings are obviously arriving in Ireland, and he was periodically actually allied with Vikings, marrying his daughter Amlav to Olaf the White, King of Dublin, and they were allies. And he was ultimately successful in his bid for the kingship of Tara with the help of these Vikings. But although he was a friend to the Vikings of Leinster, he didn't like them in his own territory, and he was very resolute in his resisting the attempts of the Vikings at Strangford Lough. When they tried to strengthen their presence in the north. So he was quite happy with the Vikings being over there and not in his lands.
It does beg to wonder at that point the usage of the term Fairforn and Darkforn, because I think once you get into the period of Olaf the White, that's where you start to see divisions between politically between two groups, the Fairforn and the Darkforn. But also on top of that as well, it's difficult to keep account of singular Viking groups that come over from both Norway and Denmark by themselves as loners and start doing Viking raids. I think this is the problem here, is that we start to, especially for the writers for the Book of Armagh, in Armagh, who are loyal to the Southern Uí Néill at the time, even they seem a bit confused to these different groups that are coming in. And even the usage of the term Fairforn and Darkforn that they use to simulate between the two factions of the men of Luckland, the men of Norway. It seems that even the Southern Uí Néill in Armagh are very confused to these groups. So yeah, it's a very confusing time between, the factions are in Dublin and the factions that seem to be wandering around up in the north, like.
Yeah, so I know the Emer, who had settled some of their, they managed to build some long forts in Ulster. One of the biggest problems they had is whenever they would go back across to, Jorvik, because they owned northern England too, or they would go raiding in Scotland. Is every time they got on their ships to go across to these campaigns, and making sure that their kingships were safe over in England, the Uí Néill were burning down these long forts, and
Yeah, yeah,
raiding
that's
them.
very true. But I think it depends which faction of the ENL you're talking to. And at the time, like as we switch from the usage of the term Fairthorn and Darkthorn into just Emer, because eventually the Emer become the dominant faction between the Irish Vikings, the Ustamen, or the Gaul Gael, as they're referred to in the annals at the time. Um, it depends which side the EEM are on at the time as well, because once at one point they're on the side of Flan Shinna, and then they're quickly switching over and joining Aid side as well, which then opens them up for an attack from the likes of Flan Shinna and stuff. So politically, it depends which way they're jumping on board of. So yeah, it definitely is a problem. That they'll side with one side, right? They'll give their hostages up, and they'll have their marriage alliances set, and then the moment they'll jump onto their boat to go over to York, the tide of power has changed, and then they find that Dublin is burning and stuff.
Yeah, it's a very politically sort of hostile area for. Oh, thank you very much for the gifts, Boot Girl and Mr. Broads. Thank you very much. Um, the Yeah, I mean, Ian is obviously securing the north. He's not really interested in anything wider beyond that. It's the as the Vikings have come in. Ireland's had a bit of a tumultuous sort of half century before that, and really a lot of kingdoms are struggling for vying for dominance. But the Uí Néill seem to have used this time to strengthen their hold of Ulster rather than wishing to expand further, until they get Viking endorsement or help for the kingship of Tara. So it just shows that I think he's a really interesting character to show the start of these relationships between Vikings or Norse settlers and kings in Ireland and Irish people, because there is a bit of a myth that the Vikings came over and they just wanted to kill everything, and they had no interest in sort of fostering these relationships with the native Irish. But we can see already that they're helping Irish kings, and they would continue to do so to reach their political goals, whatever that may be, as long as it
Yeah.
was in their interests. Obviously,
Well, I think the problem is that the term Viking is such a, because if we're using it from the Victorian usage of the word, which is a very much of an umbrella term, the problem is, especially when we go into the period of Aid, is that it's trying to identify which group we're talking about, because you definitely had the Emer who were definitely like the problem with the Emers is that they keep switching between the Kennel Owen, who believe because they're very much on the side of the clergy of Derry, or how we like to say modernly, Londonderry.
do we?
What was it called? And what was it called? And the Southern Uí were very much supporting Armagh. And the problem with Derry and Armagh at the time was that what was it? Derry very much believed in the decentralization of the church, and Armagh very much believed in the centralization. Sorry, yeah. So Derry believed in decentralization of the church with the law of Saint Columba, and Armagh believed in the law of Saint Patrick, which was very much the belief of centralization of the church.
Yeah.
Except for the problem is with the law of Saint Patrick is they very much believed in centralization with Armagh at the head with full control. So you can see why Derry was really trying to put its foot down and say, I am not giving you all my tax. Thank you very much.
Well, it's interesting because this is again around the time of Iad Allen that you're stating. Just as the Vikings are arriving, the Kinloan would actually eventually switch their allegiance to Armagh as they took it, and the Kinlochonal would be the support of Columkill, who was obviously he was a member of the Kinlochonal. But
Yeah.
the Kinloan would eventually use Armagh as its hub
Mm-hmm.
to support I don't know whether they felt the winds of change happening with the works of St Patrick's life and the dominance that Armagh Church was happening. And this was we could see it sort of around Iad Finlay's sort of reign, when even when they're mentioning things happening in Armagh to do with the church, like there was a murder in the monastic city of Armagh in 870, and whenever they're describing the murder, they say it happens at the door of the Kinloan overking of the Kinloan. So they're even when they're writing sort of, and this is a symbiotic relationship. They're both using each other, but the fact that the Armagh is when writing about a murder in their city, that they're referencing their Kinloan now over kings or supporters, and we actually see as well that the Kinloan start to be buried there in what is known as the Cemetery of the Kings, basically. Again, they're using it to legitimize themselves, and they've sort of taken a step away by the 9th century from Columba, which is the Kinlochonal of Donegal, and who would progenate the clans such as the Gallagher's and the O'Donnells. They're sort of quite linked too. So, yeah, you just see a lot of sort of avenues happening here within it to make up the political state of Ireland at the time. But I think probably the most important person who I've misspelt on the slide there, I've forgotten an L, but is if you're an O'Neill, the most important person would probably be Niall Glundov. Not the most important person in your entire history, but certainly as an O'Neill, since it's from Niall Glundov that the surname, obviously O'Neill, originates from. So, would you like to open us up a wee bit about Niall Glundov?
Niall Glundov. He was the biggest rival to Flann Sinna at the time. Getting back to the fighting between the likes of Derry and Armagh, which was the very basis of the feud that started at the very start of the Viking Age. It's great that we're getting into the actual peak of the conversation because, as you pointed out there, a lot of the time the main focus for a lot of people is in the coastal area with the Vikings attacking the coastal monastic area. However, politically in Ireland, the main focus at the time was actually the internal conflict that was going on between Derry and Armagh and how the kings of Ireland were shaping themselves around the support for either Derry or Armagh. By the time we get up to this point, it's gotten to a point where it's even affecting the kingship itself, where Flann Sinna's father, Mael Shocknall, became Mael Shocknall the first King of Ireland, as Flann Sinna identified himself as, with a nice big cross in the middle of, Clonmacnoise. There's a cross dedicated to both Mael Shocknall the first and Flann Sinna, declaring that they are King of Ireland, not over King of Ireland, but King of Ireland. And that's very important because before then, kings were identifying themselves as either trying to identify as Ard Ria, High King of Ireland, by gathering every single tribute, always having difficulty with trying to submit Cashel, the Rock of Cashel down in my place in Munster, and ultimately always gaining the title of King of Tara, the over King of Ireland, basically being, how we would consider it from a English perspective as the King of Ireland, but not quite yet. They haven't captured every single settlement compared to then Mael Shocknall the First and Flann Sinna. Now the difference being is that an overking is somebody who has more of a decentralized realm or kingdom of Ireland, where The King of Ireland is somebody who has more of a centralized role on the island, which for people like who are involved with the clergy up in Derry or the likes of Niall Glondov and stuff, this is a huge kind of no-no from their perspective, because then they would have to respect the family tree of Flanshina, and Flanshina quite literally was trying to take full control, as you pointed out there, Michael, early on. At this point, it was Northern Uí Néill taking our go. Southern Uí Néill would then take a go, then it would go back to Northern Uí Néill. Flanshina was looking to completely centralise and just have his son take over after him as King of Ireland, which was a trend we were starting to see in both France with the Franks, with the rise of Charlemagne. Also, we've seen that with England. England at this point with Alfred the Great and stuff was starting to go down this path of one king of the island. He writes about this in the Saxon Chronicles, that his ultimate goal was to have one king. Was it one God, one king, one people? And it was the same up in Scotland as well. Kenneth had appeared in Scotland, and he had unified, well, he was in the middle of unifying both the Gaelic of Scotland and the Pictish people and the various other Anglo groups that had immigrated up to Scotland as well, and other groups that Michael could easily dive more into detail of. So it was a trend in Europe to go more into the centralised path, and that's the path that Flanshina was trying to go down, until Niall Glondov was doing everything in his power to make sure that wasn't the case. But very interesting thing that you pointed out, Michael, is that while Niall Glondov, and not so much Niall Glondov, but the Kennel Owen was in power, sometimes they would actually side on the side of Armagh, and perhaps maybe that gives us a little bit of an indication that if the shoe's on the other foot, maybe Niall Glondov and the Kennel Owen would perhaps take on the path of centralisation. They just didn't want Flanshina having the path of centralisation. What's kind of your view on that?
No, I mean, a part of me thinks is Flanshina ruling in 917. I can't.
Yeah, he gets killed in 917, wasn't it?
Yeah, because I know in 917 there's a paper I read. I can't remember, but anyway, I know that in 917 they actually marched south. The Kinlowen marched south, and it refers to their overkings of Leinster and Munster. So I'm sort of thinking that this ties very much in with Flanshina, and what they did is they went and supported their overking, who quite possibly could be Flanshina, to halt the Viking occupation of Waterford and Dublin. So there is a brief period here where they. I mean, the thing is with especially with the Kinlowen, and you'll see this right up to Brian Boru claiming overkingship of them, is a very and Henry II is another good example as a political. One of the political tools used by the Gaelic nobility was to swear submission, not because they were swearing submission and accepted the overkingship per se of the individual, forcing them to, or or bribing them to. It was a way for them just to go, yeah, go on, yeah, I bend the knee, whatever, and then they would withdraw their army, whether it be a Munster army or an English army, and it would allow the Kinlowen and other clans who would do this afterwards the ability to raise forces, to secure their position. And we see that they were often in rebellion against their inverted commas overkings. So again, this was a political tool used by all Gaelic nobility, and it just shows the how different. One of the mistakes I feel that people, whenever they sort of look at the likes of like Henry II gaining the submission of all the Irish, or most of the Irish, and other kings, they use Europe as the basis for their idea of kingship and their idea of how politics and nobility worked in Europe. But Ireland, although it wasn't disconnected from Europe, it did have its own rules, and this was one of them. So again, they are seen on one hand fighting against Flan Sinner's sort of expansions, but at the same time we're seeing evidence that they would sometimes support him. So, and it depends on the wider political issues at hand. And obviously in 917, the Vikings of Waterford and Dublin are maybe getting a bit too big for their boots and maybe need
Well,
to
it
be
was the
shut down.
return of. Well, to be fair, the Eamers had every right to get too big for their boots.
Yeah.
Sure, Flan Sinna had pretty much done an old. It was either Flan Sinna had done an old switcheroo on the Eamer, or the Eamer had done an old switcheroo on Flan Sinna. But wasn't it? Let me have a quick gander over there. But it was 20 years earlier, before the Battle of Oil Bridge, that Flan Sinna had either turned on the Eamer or the Eamer had turned on Flan Sinna. But regardless of it, Flan Sinna had marched over to Dublin, sieged it, and had knocked out, what was it, Citric, was it Citric? Yeah, he knocked out the Eamers regardless, the main nobility of it, and he knocked out the military force that came with the Eamers, the Ustmen, the Gaul Gael. And he kept it's now proven with archaeology evidence from John Sheehan that the traders stayed there, that there wasn't a sudden trade in switcheroo of the traders in Dublin. So they kept on to the same Irish Viking traders in Dublin, and that's supported by John Sheehan in his book. I actually have the book right here. One second. It is called. Bum, 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 bum. He makes this argument in the book. The Viking Age, Ireland and the West by John Sheehan. And in that one, John Sheehan points out the fact that there isn't a change in the traders in Dublin at the time. They kept on to the old Irish Viking traders because they understood the economic and finance of the Scandinavian economic and finance at the time. So Flan Sinna didn't get rid or remove anyone that was involved with the economic and finance because he wouldn't be able to replace them even if he wanted to, but he didn't have any problems with anyone to do with the economic and finance, the Vikings that understood how trade worked in Dublin. And I think that's always mostly the case a lot of the time where you take over a settlement, you're not going to be in a rush to remove people who understand the banking, the economics, the trade of that area. And it was the same when Flan Sinna took over Dublin. But regardless, getting back on point again, he for some strange reason there is a relationship going on between the Eamer at the time, especially between Broder Eamer and Flan Sinna. But there seems to be a case of when Broder Eamer passes away, that Flan Sinna has a disagreement with somebody within the Eamer, ends up sieging Dublin, and just outright pushes out the military force of the Eamer and the Eamer themselves, the Irish Vikings, out of Dublin, and forces them to go over to the halls of Brittany and also the halls in the Isle of Man, where they have to kind of reorganize themselves before in a very, very kind of blitzkrieg maneuver in around 917. They very quickly, by a force both on land and by sea, siege Waterford first, very quickly take Waterford before blitzkrieging up the road up to Dublin and reoccupying that again before Ragnar Eamer catches the majority of the military force, flies over to Jorvik in York, sieges it, captures that as well, catching everybody off guard, both the English and the King of Ireland at the time. No, it wasn't the King of Ireland, it was the King of the North, because Flan Sinna had passed away, and we were dealing with the King of the North, which was Niall Glundubh. And Niall Glundubh, then completely off guard, had to march his military force down to Dublin. And that's quite interesting because Niall Glundubh had always had a very healthy relationship with the Eamer until this very point. So you do wonder what kind of backdoor or closed door politics was going on between the Eamer and the various branches of the Uí Néill clan, well, the Uí Néill groups like.
Yeah, and I believe was Niall Glundubh claiming the title of King of Tara at this stage? Because I read in one source
actually difficult. He perhaps did. He definitely had the title of King of the North. I think the problem is that he was fighting with a good chunk of the what was it, the Uí Néill. And at that point, because the Uí Néill were pushing for more centralization, and on top of that as well, let me have a quick look at the list for the Battle of Oil Bridge, because we can actually see who rocked up that day and who didn't. what was it? The Battle of Isle Bridge, 918. Because I just want to quickly. Oh, and that's definitely not popping up now. But regardless, I'm sure what's very funny is that Flann Sinna's son had done a switcheroo and supported the Uí Néill. Let me just quickly check that one because I think he played the political game again and he did a switcheroo too, and he ends up helping usurp the Canal Owen, and he jumps in bed straight away with the no, I'm wrong actually. The MacFlan were actually on the side of, and they're killed. So maybe, yeah, I'd have to delve deeper into that. But it seems that there were members of the MacFlan that were siding on the side of Niall Glundov against the what was it, the men of Dublin. So I'd have to delve more into the political side of that one. But it seems to be, but at the same time, Flann Sinner's main son isn't at the battle itself. So perhaps maybe he was doing a dirty switcheroo as well. It's a funny one because what happened is that Niall Glundov had turned against Flann Sinna simply because I don't think he wanted it. He definitely did not want. It was meant to be his turn next on the crown. And what Flann Sinna wanted to do was centralise the island and have his main son take over the crown. And of course, the other sons of Flann Sinna didn't like this, and also Niall Glundov didn't like this as well. So there was a huge usurpation, which kind of left a kind of really bad taste in everyone's mouth. So when the Eamers came back to the island and stuff, and Niall Glundov was killed at the Battle of Isle Bridge, I think there was a huge, massive switcheroo of the politics again, where it was Flann Sinna's branch that took back over the kingship of Tara again. But they, from that point onwards, all the way up to 980, until the arrival of Mael Shocknall II, went for the decentralised approach as the Eamer started to invade back into York again. That's my interpretation of what's going on. But God, it's bloody complicated, all right. Like, especially with the politics happening behind closed doors.
Yeah, it is a obviously a complicated time. Hang on, I'm just trying to zoom this in for some people saying they can't read the name of the list. Hopefully that's a wee bit better for them. Yeah, I mean it is all of Irish history is very complicated, but obviously we know that Niall Glundov would eventually die, and possibly if he was King of Tara, be the first King of Tara to die in battle. At the Battle of Island Bridge near Dublin, which is so. And then his son, I find his son Murta to be quite an interesting character in the O'Neills. Obviously, he wouldn't adopt the surname O'Neill; his descendants would, after their grandfather and great grandfather. Niall Glundov, who we just spoke about. But Murta was a lot more aggressive in his expansions and his ambitions, although he definitely never retained or gained the title King of Tara. But Murta was actually known as Murta of the Leather Cloaks, which is apparently it sort of reference to the cloaks that his soldiers were wearing when they were campaigning, so he was, like I said, he was a very aggressive campaigner. In fact, he actually led quite a successful campaign against the Viking colonies in the Hebrides in Scotland. But he's also known for campaigning far from Ulster in Meath, to Usherga, to Dacia, and he actually captured the Overking of Munster, Kellichan Cashel. But he brought him back to the Southern O'Neill, who were his overlords at this stage. So we can see that he's not even a king. Although he's aggressively expanding, and he has an overking, and yet he's doing these militaristic campaigns as far as the Hebrides in Scotland and as far as Munster.
That's very interesting because Murtough is the one I've least touched on because he's kind of gone under the radar because the main focus right now is on the over kingship, especially with Dublin expanding into York and stuff at this period. It's also interesting you were pointing out how he was expanding into Scotland. I do find that interesting because he's father, Niall Glundov, had a good marriage alliance with the King of Scotland at the time as well. Right now, I see a lot of Irish academics actually really reviewing that relationship between the Kennel Owen and Scotland, especially since Scotland was very pro centralization. Um,
Well, I
is it
wonder
the same?
if I wonder if because obviously he's hitting the Viking colonies as a Hebrides, maybe he's helping assisting the Scottish with
Yeah, I
their
was thinking
idea
that.
of centralization. So he's like I say it's known as a successful campaign. So um,
Hmm.
he's managed to push into those areas and maybe weaken those areas for the Scottish Crown to.
Because this definitely seems to be fun. Now, I don't. Is the what was it called? The Kings of Scotland at this point. Where are they centralized? Are they centralized in Edinburgh or somewhere else?
No, so in 917, it's the Dunkeld dynasty, I believe. Is it the
Hmm.
Dunkeld? They weren't based out of Edinburgh. I can't remember the links, but we also have the Kingdom of Moray in the north is
Yeah.
obviously also um, uh, expanding and rebelling. So, within this sort of time period, we've also got to remember that both kingships are really heavily using their ancient ties and familial ties to Ireland to
Hmm.
legitimize their rule of Scotland, or what would become Scotland.
Yeah.
Albert.
We will just jump over to the. Can you see the questions in the comment section? We'll just jump over there before we get back to our conversation to do with the relationship between the Kennel Owen and Scotland. Just a few people asking about some of these surnames and stuff. I think one's in kind of going between French and English, so I'm not really the biggest one for French and English there. So it's slightly. I don't want to sound too rude or anything, but I just read there the one just underneath it. When did the practice of women taking the last names of the husband begin in Ireland, or has it always been that way, Michael?
Sorry, say that again. I got a bit of a glitch. What was that?
Oh yeah, that's grand. Just so everyone's aware, myself and Michael are running through OBS right now, so sometimes the sound can jump up and down, especially with Discord and that. It's the same problem we have with myself and the creative Contessa. Just to repeat myself again, when did the practice of women taking the last names of the husband begin in Ireland, or has it always been that way?
So that's actually a very good question, and
Mm,
I wouldn't actually have a definitive answer for you for that. But I will sort of broaden on the idea, like where the surnames originate from. A lot of
mm,
surnames are coming into Ireland. Well, not coming into Ireland; they are founding in Ireland. So some of the older surnames are on record are the O'Cannons, the O'Clearys, the O'Heenys. Um, but most families actually would trace their surname to an ancestor who was born around the 10th century, and if they had anything to do with the Battle of Clontarf in 1014, a lot of Munster families, especially, would take their surname from an ancestor who fought at that battle. So, um, but all surnames are patronymic in Ireland, or 90% of surnames were patronymic. So you took it after your father. We can still see this in Norse names. So if you were known as Amla, let's say Aoife, you would have already been associated with, and your father was Flan, then you would have been Aoife Nick Flan. Because your father is the one who holds the power, the political power, owns the estates, owns the lands. So if
mm,
anyone's going to know who you're allied to, whether through kinship, being the daughter, marriage, you're taking the name of the most prominent person in the family, so that
mm.
people know not to mess with you. Basically, if you say that I am just Aoife, and you're being absconded or being attacked or being mugged or whatever, let's just say for hypothetical state, you're um, you need a political name or a name with some standing to back you up. And so that is why you would take on the name of your father and your husband. But as the practice itself, as a standardization, I wouldn't actually know, especially for the fact that actually, believe it or not, Irish surnames, there was still something like 30%, maybe even more. I think it was actually 50% of Irish people were not even taking a standardized surname right up until the 19th century. It's only after the 19th century we have the standardization of surnames in Ireland that people start to adopt. Now, they would have known king groups they're associated with. They would have, there's a rich oral tradition. But these people would have just been, like my father's name's Martin, I would have just been Michael, son of Martin. And that's right up to the 19th century. Unless you were associated with some sort of land-holding family, you wouldn't have bothered.
It really goes to show that the British really do not take over until about 1803, and that's when British customs of surnames and stuff really start to take over from that point. Is that what's going on?
Well, it's an old surnames are still very much an Irish thing for Irish people. They exist, but they're just not used in the same way that the British are using them. They're just not that important unless you are land holding, or
we just have sorry for poking you there, Michael. People are asking you, can you bring up your sound on your side? Is there a way you can bring up your sound?
Yeah, hang on.
Your sound is very low on the YouTube side.
My sound is very low on the YouTube side.
Yeah, on YouTube. Finn there is asking, they can hear me fine, but they're just asking, can you bring up your sound a little bit more?
Maybe I just start shouting.
That's what I have to sometimes just to keep you guys updated. What's going on is that Michael will be hearable on my side, right? And then he'll adjust his sound, and then although he'll be hearable on your side, I won't be able to hear him anymore because of the OBS's relationship with Discord and YouTube. It's horrible at times. Like
I don't mind.
He'll do. Sorry.
I don't mind if Fionn can't hear me. He's a bad influence on this. but TikTok says my sound's great, so
it's OBS. It's OBS is doing it. Myself and Rachel have been at it for a while now. It's always OBS. OBS is always causing this kind of muffled deep water sound going between YouTube and Discord. It's just a funny relationship. Depends on the coding they're using.
Yeah, it's technology is not my forte anyway. So, what's he saying? Maybe we should use Google Hangouts, although it's archaic. Well, it sounds like...
I got told that as well. We should do that next time, actually, use Google Hangouts, because the lads were saying that last time as well, that Google Hangouts is better than Discord for moving the sound between Discord into OBS and then OBS over to YouTube.
Yeah.
So we'll have to use Google next time, actually. That's a good one, actually, Finn.
As for everyone asking on TikTok for surnames, I'll probably, after we end the live with Philip, I imagine probably in the next sort of 15-20 minutes, and let him get back. Are you streaming tonight, Philip?
Am I streaming tonight? No, I might take it easy tonight. Actually, I was very burned out yesterday, so I might actually chill and do my video. Because this weekend, guys, I'm doing a video on the Irish Vikings raiding the northern Spain in 960 and 970 and 980. The Irish Vikings going into the north part of Spain with their Norwegian and English allies, raiding the north part of it and then bringing back the spoils back to Dublin. So I'll be covering that for this weekend. So I'll focus on getting that video done. It's not the biggest, lengthiest video, but I was very burned out yesterday. I was going from a meeting into, because I'm also covering another video next week on early medieval literature with a good friend of mine. So I'm going to be covering that next week. And so after the meeting, and then I did a live as well, I was just so burned out. I was just like, so I might take it easy today and just focus on getting the video done.
Well, there you go. You won't be able to catch him on Irish Medieval History streaming tonight after this, but he does stream most nights. So if
Yeah, yeah.
and after my streams, in fact, so whenever you finish with mine, you can pop across him. Keelan Cross, yeah, I can hear you. That's all that matters. You're right. That's all that matters. So anyone else, get stuffed. Viewers down to 5 people. No, yeah, if any of you are asking about surnames and the origins, I will, once I kick Philip away and let him go chill in sort of 15-20 minutes, we will I'll crack on for another half an hour or so and give you some surnames, so that's not a problem. As for if any of you are looking for, I think maybe we can we won't go too much further into the O'Neills because it's already been 50 minutes and we've only covered 3 people. So it's maybe that would be a 24-hour stream. So maybe we can organise for another O'Neill. We'll go through
The thing is as well, the excitement right now is definitely on the internal politics that's happening with especially since last year and stuff, and there's been this resurgence of this taste for more study into Niall Glondub's relationship with Flann Sinnna. We got a good sample of that with the video game Assassin's Creed Valhalla. So a lot of people were like, okay, so who's Flann Sinnna, who's Niall Glondub? And then from there, people started getting deeper and deeper into the internal politics, especially from a university standard. And the universities were all over it because the universities for years wanted to get more into the internal politics of Ireland and everybody loves Viking raids on coastal areas. That's great and everything. But what people really want to look at from an academic standard is the Book of Armagh. Because the Book of Armagh is such a biased book, which gives us a really good indication that there's fighting going on and a good push for the centralization of Ireland that the Southern Uí Néill are pushing for, especially the likes of Mael Seachna I, Flann Sinnna, and then later on when Brian Brew usurps the crown completely and crowns himself the Emperor of the Gael at Armagh. And so a lot of academics for years have been looking at this and have really wanted to do a deeper dive into the internal politics of Ireland, but everybody's so focused because everybody's got, the old fetish with the Vikings, that everybody's been so focused on the coastal raiding in the coastal monastic area. So now that people are finally got into the actual meat of the conversation because of the video game Assassin's Creed Valhalla and the video game Thrones of Britannia, they're starting to get people involved, which means there's money starting to go into that kind of area of expertise. And so the academics are all over it right now, and that means that there's more stuff getting published on Flann Sinnna and Niall Glondub. So no wonder we have so much to be talking about.
Yeah, I mean, someone pointed out there that it's still the MacAlpins who are in power whenever Murtaugh's sort of doing his campaign. I think I was out by about 100 years with the House of Dunkeld. But the point still stands because the MacAlpins would still also claim descent from the Irish king groups in the Dalriada that would make their way across. So the point that I was trying to make is that Scotland at this time, their kings are trying to use Ireland as a political tool, their kingship to Ireland as a political tool for their further ambitions. So, and they're to legitimize their rule. And I think
the relationship. I'm sorry for butting in there. No. It's a really important part, Michael. Important point I need to make, Michael. Yeah. But that's the relationship between Kennel Owen as they convert. This is now umbrelling. Going for an old umbrella of the timeline, going from 950, sorry, not 950, 917, all the way over to what was it called? The late 13th century with the O'Neills fighting against the English, just going into the Scottish War of Independence and Bruce's invasions. the relationship between the kings of Scotland and the Kenil Owen and the O'Neills later on has always been very, very positive. They've always been very, very close to another. So it's not just at this period that we see the Kenil Owen supporting, who later become the O'Neills, supporting heavily the kings of Scotland, but it always seems to be the case that the Kenil Owen, the O'Neills later on, have always been huge allies of the kings of Scotland.
Yeah, I mean, right up to supposed story of Robert the Bruce exiled or escaping to Ireland is hidden by a branch of the O'Neills. So we can
Yeah.
see that they are very much working off the relationship that was already existed in Ulster between the Dalriada and other groups with Western Scotland, and that they've just continued on with that relationship and strengthened it from strength to strength. And we see that right up to Edward Bruce's campaign later on in the 13th century. For his High Kingship of Ireland, he gains a lot of support from branches of the Kinloan. So, although it's not as wide, the campaign itself is not as widespread in Ireland as people are led to believe, because most of the conflicts were internal, happening in Munster and stuff. But is this the tree shared on your link tree? It's too small.
Just one question there off Finn. Is the McGowans related to which branch are the McGowans in? I'm not quite sure what branch the McGowans are on. Michael, do you know what branch the McGowans are on for the O'Neills? Well, not the O'Neills. Sorry, Nine and the Nine Hostages. The Uí Néill.
McGowan, I'm not sure off the top of my head. I have a weird feeling that there's two branches, and one is one of the families that claimed lineage to Niall and Nine Hostages later on with the expansion. I'm not sure of but I will know the answer for the next live. Unfortunately, there are 40,000 surnames in Ireland. I can't know them all off the top of my head, but I do try my best.
It's very true.
I do try my best. I'm trying to get this a wee bit bigger for people to see if they can. Let's try, maybe that might give people a better view. If not, whenever Philip gets exiled, I'll make it bigger. Like I say, Murta was probably the best one to end it on, mainly because as well, actually, upon his death, the Ken O'Connell sort of rise to become quite dominant in Ulster for a while under the O'Cannons. So, and they actually secure the kingship of the North for a while. It's probably he's probably a good individual to sort of end the stream on. A screenshot it and they can zoom in. I mean, I just ripped that family tree off Google. If I'm honest, it's quite a good one. I've used it before. Most of the names I've checked. So whoever did this, I can't give them credit for it. But it it's just off the internet. I didn't want to spend all day looking for just images that we would be speaking over anyway. So they would it's just to give you an example of some of the names that sort of exist. So is there any? Let's see if there's any more questions with regards to the Uí Néill and any of these kings that we've mentioned. So Niall Glundov, Murta, and Iad Allen. My paternal line say I share a line with Niall, the RM269 common ancestor. I'm not that up on genetics. I know that there is an ancestor, a 5th century individual, who they have attributed or given the name as Niall, who a lot of Irish people, especially in the north and the Midlands, can sort of claim as a common ancestor around the 4th and 5th century, give or take. And they've given this progenitor the surname Niall of the Nine Hostages. Through their belief that that's a good timeline, and he's the most likely to be a progenitor of the most families, like I said, from the works of Merku in the 7th century. So, you know, it's I can't say for certain if Niall is the progenitor of this RM269. Again, genetics isn't my forte. But it's something I would like to get into because it is very heavily linked with modern sort of understandings of surnames and where they originate from. So it is definitely something that I would like to maybe investigate further. Niall of the Nine ? Yeah, Niall of the Nine Hostages, 5th century warlord or king. He's often given the title of High King of Ireland, but he was probably nothing more than a warlord who sort of conquered the northwestern part of Ulster. So it's a bit like the biblical stories of the Davidic line in Israel and stuff like that, and they're attributed to having these vast waves of kingdoms, and quite possibly they were just sort of warlords within a certain area whose story is manifested into this mighty kingship. So it's quite a common tale as old as man, to embellish on ancestors' deeds. Patrick's a great example. We just celebrated St. Patrick, whose conversion, his story of his minister of Ireland and his conversion is more than likely a amalgamation of at least Palladius, who was another bishop sent in 431. A lot of the stories attributed to Patrick could be Palladius is doing. They've just a Book of Armagh sort of mingled them two together. Turchin and Merku, two abbots who wrote in the 7th century. We're doing a bit of propagandering. I thought that was debunked by Israel. I'm just saying I'm not going to go into the the ancient Israel, but I'm just quoting Dan McLennan, who's a scholar on the history of Israel, about the size of the kingship. But if you've got other beliefs or whatever, I'm just using it as an example. It's not don't be taking that as like out of context or whatever.
Just heading back into the comment section there, lads. I'm just, because there's a big conversation kicked off and a debate and stuff, I'm just gonna pick out the ones that I think are direct questions at us. So if I skip over anything, I'm sorry about that. And we're also, you said we're live on TikTok as well, so we're trying to navigate through these questions and stuff. So if I miss anything, I'm sorry about that. So I have one off Finn there saying, how true was it that Niall and Nine Hostages' mother was a Saxon from Europe, not England? God, that there is a very, very good possibility of that, Finn, to be quite honest with you, because Niall was raiding into both Britain at the time, from the north of Ireland, and he was also raiding into the north of France, the Frankish areas up in the north, and he was taking women back, from my interpretation of the mythology. And we have to highlight the fact that this is from a mythology interpretation, because the written literature of Niall doesn't happen until hundreds of years later. That's where Niall starts to then appear in the literature itself. Now, we know of the existence of Niall because of DNA testing that some of you guys are debating and talking about in the comment section. However, literature-wise, he doesn't appear until hundreds of years later. That's why a lot of people believe he didn't exist. However, we do know of Scotty raiders that did go into Britain and the north of France to go raiding. The Romans report about these raiders. However, the Romans do not write about anyone referred to, or any over-king referred to, as Niall and the Nine Hostages. So it's very difficult to know if he solidly did exist. However, it is in the realm of possibility that there was someone referred to as Niall and the Nine Hostages, and he did take women from Saxon women from both modern day England and the modern day north of France. So that is, to answer your question, Finn, that is in the realm of possibility that one of the women were a Saxon woman. Now, it's also the same with Niall's father as well, that perhaps he was a raider that did go into both either the north of France or into modern day England or Wales, had taken a Saxon woman, had gone back, gotten her pregnant, and then didn't respect Niall's kingship, which is in the mythology. It's actually a poet that takes on Niall as a adopted son, and then he vows that Niall would then take back his own lands later on, which the opportunities were there, given that Niall could have become a raider in around, 370 all the way up to 410. There were opportunities there for Niall to become a raider, go over to England, make a large profit, and then come back to Ireland with that profit, and then build up his status within the community, going from a son of a slave all the way up to over King of Ireland. You know, the possibility is there for Niall to do that. So it is in the realm of possibility, Finn, if that answers your question. Do you have anything to elaborate on that, Michael?
Yes,
question?
The Saxon invasion of Ireland is actually hotly debated, and it seems to be most academics sort of lean towards it was a steady migration over a couple of centuries, with links to Germanic Roman units based in England. So there was this continuation of Germanics people making their way into England, and Philip has elaborated on the raiding going across. If we go for the traditional account of the Saxons invading and taking over those southwest and southeastern and eastern sides of England, that was Niall taking a bride from one of these kingdoms. It seems unlikely because Niall is at the height of his kingship as these Saxons are supposedly settling in England, and it wouldn't strike me as a good political maneuver for a kingdom, a Saxon kingdom just forming in the east coast of England, who to form an alliance with anyone outside of its immediate area for stronger kinships and ties. So from that side, I sort of wouldn't agree that it's an English Saxon. From a more academic leaning side of the argument, with the slow migrations of Germanic groups into England, it is quite possible that, like Philip has said, that he did marry someone from one of these migration groups or from a Germanic descended individual who has then later been associated with Saxons of England, because we know that history is often simplified, and someone has written down in the early medieval period Saxon, and then someone in the later medieval period and possibly even later has just attributed that with the Saxons based on the traditional narrative of the invasion of the Saxons in the east. So
just another note on that as well. When people are making claims in the comment section, I don't want to sound rude or anything, but could you guys add in the source as well? Because sometimes when you're making claims and stuff, I'm not sure what source you're talking about. It makes it easier for myself and Michael to have a conversation with you if you make your claim, such as, Niall's mother was from Scotland, and then have the source that goes with it, because I'm not quite sure what particular source you're talking of. I'm aware of Niall's relationship with Scotland and stuff. I'm just not particularly sure what source you're referring to. So just out of just to make it easier for myself and Michael, even if it is something that we actually just didn't know before, it actually makes it makes it easier for us to clarify and support what claim you're saying. So just when you're say something, or to just tell us what book you got that from with the page as well, would be really, really helpful. And also, if it's a link or anything online, make sure to post that link up as well. It just makes it easier for myself and Michael, when we're talking, or even fact checking afterwards, just to go and check that. So yeah, we
I
were
will.
talking about
I will
the
just
relationship
quickly.
between.
I will
Yeah, yeah.
just quickly say that another thing to just bear in mind when you're speaking about Niall and his wife is that
Mm,
the fact that they only mentioned one wife kind of leans to me towards religious overtones of, because
mm,
the Niall would not have just had one wife. For the fact of that we know of or claimed 12 sons descend from him. Never mind the amount of daughters. I don't think he just had sons.
mm,
One poor individual, one wife. That poor woman. But beyond that, we know that in Gaelic society, that kings, in fact, all throughout Europe, kings at that time
mm.
period were having more than one wife. So it's just something to obviously bear in mind.
Mm.
Keelan Cross, trust source, trust me, bro. Yeah, we get a lot of that. We do get a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, um, so it happens. But if you've got a source, we're all. The thing is, we're not even being contradicting when we say give us a source. Like, haha, give us one because you can't give us one. We're genuinely interested in your sources so that we can read up and follow up on that, because
Yeah.
we can only read so much and be directed to so many sources. It's there's thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of sources out there for so it's good for us to be exposed to this, even if it's far fetched. It just gives us an understanding of another angle. So
Mm, mm, mm.
you were saying there about the Kinlowen in Scotland. Sorry, before I interrupted you.
Yeah, that's kind of where we left off before we went down the deep rabbit hole of the relationship between the Kenilworth and Scotland, and I think even our comment section went down the deep the rabbit hole with us as well, because they're now debating the relationship between Niall and the Nine Hostages, which eventually goes down the Kenilworth path, and their marriage alliances between the kings of Scotland, even early on with Niall and the Nine Hostages, and perhaps he married a woman very early on. They're kind of debating that amongst themselves, and that's why I was just like, okay, now I'm starting to lose this conversation. Can we use sources to just support
Well,
a
yeah.
lot of the claims being made?
Uh,
Because marriage alliances is very, very, very funny, especially when we're dipping in and out of the mythology area and into the factual area as well, and who married who and which branch of who are you, especially when it's very political. Because the Kennel Owen, from my interpretation, and maybe Michael will go against this, the Kennel Owen always want to kind of highlight the fact that they're very much, related to the Kings of Scotland, and the Kings of Scotland always like highlighting their Gaelic when it comes down to their relationship with the Kennel Owen and the O'Neills later on. They've always been pro, let's show ourselves as Gaelic people. Look, I'm married to so and so. That's definitely the case, isn't it, Michael?
So, with the Kenilworth, it waxed and waned. The relationship was more for Scotland to associate its uh, paternal ties to Ireland, but the
Mm,
Kenilworth would definitely inflate that. The Kinlochernal would do too, with their links with Iona, and many groups would sort of use this to sort of fluff up their ancestry. But by and large, it was more the Scottish kings were sort of trying to legitimize their rule of Scotland um, through their Irish blood, claimed
mm,
or unclaimed. Um, but the Kinloan would fluff that up and sort of be like, yeah, yeah, yeah,
mm,
you are, kin of us, you are. Because at the same time, it's sort of, it gives the Kinloan this standing of being the father figure or the big brother of Scotland, in the sense that they
mm,
can use that as leverage. And we see that with the Bruces later on. So it's even though the Kinloan aren't anything to do with the Dariada, they're who are the group associated with the western part of Scotland, Argyll, the Isles, and Antrim in Ulster. So they're
mm,
they're a latecomer in. So but they're using, because they take over a lot of the Dariata territories. They're using these links to garner favor, to build alliances, whether they're based on fact or not is And like I said, the Kinloch would use individuals like Columkill, Columba, and Amrahan, who was the ancestor, debated, but ancestor of the clans such as like the McSweeneys, and whatnot. So, it just shows that this backwards and forwards of just massaging family trees to make them more illustrious and to build these sort of relationships.
Yeah.
Sorry. This is fantastic. Thank you, Claire. I really appreciate that. Hang on, I've missed. Sorry, Connor. So I have 3 sources, but they're links. What's that for? Or is that for the 2 or 3 million roots in the northwest of Ireland paternal descent? I've seen those. To be fair, I have read many sources claiming that Niles is the ancestor for a large population in Ireland. The only thing is that they can't actually they don't have Niall's body, so they can't definitively say it is this individual. They just based on sources, they can just assume that he is the paternal ancestor. Niall was born in 361 apparently. Well, most sources actually put him in the 5th century, so 361 seems a bit early, but there are sources that put him in the 4th century too. So again, this just highlights the problem with the genetic side of it as well, that we actually can't definitively prove when he lived. If even he is semi mythical, at least we know a Niall existed. But if you then read into Niall's history, like I said, they make him out to be a high king of Ireland. They make out that everyone in Ireland is descended of him. And this is thanks to the Killoans work with Armagh, in the sense they want Niall to be the progenitor of all the royal dynasties, because they are saying that they're the more direct link to Niall, so therefore they are the rightful rulers of Ireland. So they're the ones. Goes back to my original point of massaging trees and family trees, is that they want this myth to be propagated. And this is why you have the Oenocta later on sort of rising with their own counter myth, and saying the O'Neill are not the rightful rulers of Ireland. We are, So and then it goes back to, I can't remember that line, Mahon's line, is it? What is it? The Mach line, which splits Ireland in half.
Oh yeah.
And which is again a claim by the Oenocta and the O'Neill that Ireland was split in half, and the O'Neill could rule the north and the McCarthys could rule the south. It's all propaganda to legitimize their rule. So it fits their agendas exactly, and that's anyone that's reading the sources. A great source for anything, the annals and anything from those time periods is a site called celt.ucc, which has the annals written in English, and I see a lot of websites put up this says this in the annals, so it must be true. But you've got to remember that there's actually a famous O'Donnell. There's a battle between the Fitzgeralds and the O'Donnells, and according to the annals, the king, I can't remember which king, but King O'Donnell won this great victory over the Fitzgeralds. But actually, if you read the sources, it was his marshal who led the forces. The O'Donnells weren't anywhere near the battlefield. They were about 10 miles behind it, doing nothing. But because the O'Donnells are paying money towards the church who was writing the annals at the time, they can't be seen to write that, so they write the O'Donnells are.
Oh, aye.
So, and this just shows you, what you're reading in contemporary sources, and what's actually happening on the ground is sometimes not what it seems. So, just.
Yeah, because you see that throughout, not just in Ireland, but you see that throughout all of pretty much the entire world, because you also have examples of that happening in Italy, especially with the likes of the Medici, who claimed that they're related to some knight that was in every single battle throughout all of northern Italy. And the same thing is happening in Japan as well, where you have ancestors of these great samurai families allegedly who were merchants in Nagoya, and then suddenly these Nagorian merchants, their ancestors were in every single battle around Tokyo to Kyoto, you know. So this is a case throughout all of medieval history where you've got these, especially merchant families, who claim that their family had been, you know, their family was a part of the military and they were involved with every single battle from what was it called, in their entire region, you know, just to show that, hey, look, my stick is bigger, just as big as the rest of these sticks, you know.
Yeah, I mean, a great one, one that I'm sort of researching at the minute and trying to get delve within the weeds of it all is the Dalriada. Now, there's a claim that the Dalriada may be an ancient Brythonic group with links to sort of Scotland who've come across to Ireland, but you know, in the Bronze Age, and they form these groups such as the Cruthin and the Dalriada, and they are, but they're speaking Irish. They're, you know, it's the problem with it is that they may be paternally related to these groups that have come across, but they're heavily Gaelic. There's no different. You couldn't differentiate them archaeologically between their neighbours. Anyway, they push the Dalfiatach out, who are from the areas of East Down. And a bit of South Down, Dundrum, Strangford area. They push the Dalfiatach out. And the Dalfiatach in all the annals, in the early annals, are referring to themselves as, how you doing, Lisa? Good evening. They refer to themselves as the true Ullid. And they're saying, no, we're the true Ullid. And then the Dalriada sort of later on are realising that, you know, that they're not quite happy with the fact that they're not seen as the true Ullid or the true Ulsterman. So then they later on start referring to themselves as the true Ullid and the true Ulsterman, and that they make this links. This is when the Kinlowen are starting to, you know, push the Archela east, and you know, and they start saying to the Kinlowen, we're related to you, you know, we're distantly related to you from Fergus, the mythical king of Ulster and Kerry. And you know, we're part of the Killowen and we're the true Ulstermen, and you know, it's just not true. And the Dalfiatach are just sitting there going, you know, we've never changed our family tree once, and everyone's ignoring us. And you know, the Dalriada are there with the money, going, no, we're just as Irish as you lot. So it just shows just how messy it can all get, which is why when people ask me about their surnames and I tell them, you know, you've got there's multiple origin points for these families and there's multiple areas for them, and some claim to be related, and actually, you know, to a point, it's very hard to differentiate between a lot of families. You know, it's trying to wash history. Not really. I mean, they're just the thing is, the families they've got an agenda. They're just like politicians today and kings, you know, from later centuries, in that they have, you know, they're trying to either protect what they own or so in the case of the Dalriada, they can see the Kinlowen expansion. They're pushing the Archela, they're pushing in east. They're not being stopped by anyone. They're coming in like a tidal wave, and the Dalriada are obviously seeing this and going, you know, we need to do something about this. So they just shimmy up to the Kinlowen and just sort of say, you know, and so if they have to change, you know, that their grandfather, you know, James was actually Harry, then fine, you know, James was not Harry. It's, you know, but they kept
Because
what they had.
it seems, as long as, because I assume you're talking about around 950 with the expansion of the Kennel Owen and the later the O'Neills and stuff around 950. I assume that's where you're talking from. But I assume as long as they did what the Surnames wanted them to do and they kept it to a decentralized period, that the Surnames, who were the kings of Ireland at the time, were more than happy to allow the Kennelowen to expand into those Scottish territories and stuff, just like they were allowing the Emer, the kings of Dublin and stuff, to expand into York and going. You know, they weren't going in and raiding and attacking them at the time. So I assume around 950, that's exactly what was going on, was that the Surnames were more than happy to allow the Northern in particular, the Kennelowen, to expand into Scotland as long as they got their tribute and they kept the realm decentralized.
Yeah, well,
I
like,
assume that's what's going on.
quite possibly. I mean, each generation has another angle to the
Mm,
political maneuvering that's happening within within those kingdoms. So,
mm,
like say the Kinlowen are pushing out of Inishowen in the 8th
mm,
century into Tyrone, and that's where they first pushed the Archeala east and south into
mm.
like Monaghan and Armagh. Um,
Yeah,
but at the same time, the Southern Uí Néill are already well established in Meath.
yeah,
And obviously, like I said earlier in the introduction, that this is the 8th century is the time where it starts to alternate the kingship. But
mm,
yeah, but then, like you say, you've got the 10th century where the Southern Uí Néill are the dominant force. And again, you're going to have these sort of individuals that are just sort of aligning themselves with the most powerful um, king in the area and his kin group to
mm,
to just to survive. And it is,
mm.
this is RM22 shows up in high numbers in areas of Dalriada. I don't know what RM222 is. I'm in terms of a haplogroup and what it's associated with. But another thing to remember is that kingdoms were repurposed. Same with our historical sites. So the Hill of Tara is a Bronze Age and maybe even Neolithic monument, and as these migration groups come in, they repurpose this holy site and this inauguration site
Mm,
as their own. And it's the same with names of kingdoms. So you have the Fermanagh, you have the Kinlowen and the Archeala living in Fermanagh, and they just
mm,
keep the name of the kingdom for political purposes, because you don't come into a kingdom and suddenly change the name of the kingdom, because
mm,
then you delegitimize your rule over that, because people aren't going to associate that with the
mm,
kingdom itself. So RM222, um, I'm guessing that's maybe, is that Niles? I can't remember if that's Niles king group, but anyway, there would
mm,
be families that come into the area, O'Neill families that come into the area and adopt the kingdom's name just to
mm.
like I say, legitimize their rule. So hang on. My grandfather, a historian, loved genealogy. He wrote a book called At the Ford of Birds about Ballybay, County Monaghan. Oh, well, I'll definitely have to have a look at that. It's American Irish trying to understand their lineage is exhausting. Well, that's why me and Philip are here to
Oh,
try.
digging holes for you.
uh, Basically, the winners write the history, which screws us all up. Yeah, I mean, but even the losers, like I say, the Dalriada weren't going to win against the Kinlowen. So, okay, they didn't lose per se, but they could see a possibility of a loss. So they've changed their ancestry to become a winner, and that's another
Mm,
thing that people would do. So, um, back by Rome to regain his throne in the interest of having a friendly neighbour. Tual Tekmar. He's a little bit outside He's a first century king. Tual Tekmar. He's outside of my area of expertise. I would study the 5th century to the 17th century. And I'm, like I say, we spoke about Con of the 100 Battles, Niall's purported ancestor, and he's pretty much put into the realms of mythology, and I'm pretty sure
mm,
Tual Tekmar is as well. Although we have had a good friend of ours on before, Shane, explaining about Rome's relationship to Ireland in the past, and kings sort of marrying up to Agricola during his Scottish campaign with the hopes of he had ambitions to invade Ireland. So, whether Tual Tekmar is an amalgamation of many early kings, it's quite possible. And I'm pretty sure the Roman Emperor Simancus, it's something like that. He brought 7 Irish wolfhounds to Rome, and they fought in the Colosseum. and that
Yeah,
is
yeah.
in the fifth, sixth century, somewhere around there. And so Rome and Ireland, although Ireland was on the periphery of the empire and it was never absorbed into the Roman Empire, they have close links. So,
Mm-mm-mm.
so that's the link there between this, and I think Sheehan also touched on the fact that we have Atacotai soldiers fighting in the Roman army as well. So
Yeah.
as far as Illyria, so
Yeah, there definitely is a relationship between because Shane Kent he specializes more in the archaeology side rather than the mythology side of the literature, and Shane Kent has gone over and reviewed dozens and dozens of Roman finds in Ireland, but they're not. It's obviously in the debate level because obviously Shane Kent has his own interpretation and views, and I have my own interpretation and views as well. But if we're looking at the work of bloody hell, one second, I actually have the book. The book is called Ireland in the Medieval World, AD 400 to 10,000, Lordship, King, and Religion. It seems to take the view that we're dealing with Irish who go abroad, become mercenaries, and bring back a lot of this stuff when they return into Ireland. That's why some people debate if Niall's military force had served in the Roman military or not, and that's why they're so kind of modernized when they start to take over large parts of Ireland, and why Niall was so successful, not just in Ireland but in Rome as well, because you have to remember Niall's forces in Wales were able to capture fortifications and hold on to them. So maybe it wasn't Niall and nine hostages himself, but the Uí Néill force and the Leinster force of the Scotti were able to take and occupy Roman fortifications. And to do so, you have to be up either at the standard of the Roman military at the time, or even better than the Roman military. So it does. There is. It makes sense to me for Irish to take part in the Roman military, and it wouldn't be the first time as well, because very, very early on, we do have around, is it, I think it was 90 AD, that we have a full usurpation of the the Irish kingship in Ireland when a Irish prince goes to Scotland, where the Romans were at war with the Pictish groups at the time, and requests Roman assistance in Ireland. And although Rome itself wasn't able to assist them at the time, they were able to give Roman troops to the Irish prince, who then went back to Ireland and completely usurped the Milesian kingship at the time and put in Gaelic kingship into Ireland. So there is a relationship between Ireland and Rome, especially through the usage of mercenaries between both Ireland and in Roman Empire. So it wouldn't surprise me if they are up to that standard and stuff. And that's the Roman finds we're finding in Ireland. Now, the further debate, and Shane Kent has his own interpretation, and I have my own interpretation, is are we dealing with Roman finds in Ireland, or are we dealing with insular Roman finds, as in Roman finds that come into Ireland, and then the Irish are mimicking this and doing their own, getting their own smiths to look at this stuff and then kind of making copies of these Roman finds. That's a huge debate in the archaeology world right now. So
yeah,
yeah, that's
I mean,
pretty much.
it's the same with Dr. Raoul McLaughlin, who is saying that the finds in Ballina in Limerick and the Roman hordes, silver hordes in Ballina and in Coleraine in Ulster, that these are used as a bribes to bribe
Yeah.
the Irish raiders to stop raiding towns, and that's well within the Roman modus operandi of bribing, groups from no stop raiding us, and the fact that these silver hoards contain quite obviously Roman silver cutlery that's been cut into weighted blocks, and they still have the seals on them. So, but then again, you have that, like Philip said, you have the argument about how did these finds really make it there. So that's another interpretation by another scholar. So it just shows that that time period is quite problematic in Irish history. And I know there's a debate about whether there was a suppression of Roman history in Ireland, especially during the 19th and 20th century. So, which is again another debate upon itself. So, we definitely see it with Viking history. We won't talk about the car park in Dublin. It's just one of those things that hopefully more information will come out. But as Owen O'Neill, a friend of mine and a YouTuber and historian, often says, is that we have to accept that we will probably never know the answers to all the questions. And that's just that's something that's painful, but it's it is what it is. Okay, Ghost Robert is saying about more haplogroups. Connacht are descendants of some comprising the Bruin, Fiacre, and Uí Néill, the Dalcash clan, and its families, the O'Brien. Yeah, again, like I say, haplogroups aren't my area of expertise. I would hate to just start commenting on them and give you a misinformation. So I don't know of any academics who are prolific in this area. Again, it's somewhere that I look to expand into eventually.
Well, the thing is that they're still doing further research and development into the genetic side of things. As of right now, you cannot use genetics. I don't want to undermine anyone in the comment section, but this year the universities are not allowing genetic evidence, because every bloody year there's a new article from the genetic teams that contradict what they were saying the previous years. So this year, if you're using genetics in your argument from an academic standard, you really, really, really need to know what you're talking about, because a lot of the times, because the information is changing every single year, the universities may not take it seriously. So as of right now, nobody from the historical world is taking genetics too seriously until the genetic scientists themselves kind of perfectly square it away, because it's still, the thing is that they're still developing a lot of these techniques and stuff, and then you have other academic and researchers who are kind of getting this little bit of information and just kind of running with it. It's the same with the term Celtic DNA and stuff. That they're applying Celtic DNA from a very kind of open umbrella perspective right now, and until they have that completely hammered down of what exactly they are talking about, because the research is still developing, for the time being we're trying to avoid conversations to do with genetics, and we're trying to keep to the historical literature and the archaeological finds.
First off, Mikey, thanks again for the gifts. It's great to see you in the live again. What did I see there? Someone asked me how would I pronounce something, but I didn't see what the name was. How would you pronounce my family's name? Sheshnan. I pronounce it Sheshnan, but my Irish is again. Some of these names are they're using the traditional Irish sort of spelling of them. And again, you've got Ulster dialect, Munster dialect, but I would pronounce it Sheshnan, and I know they're from County Clare, and it's normally anglicised to Sexton. So if anything, I'd actually pronounce it Sexton, because that's what most people anglicise their name to. So let me see, people with their agenda. Yeah, again, it's just no, thank you, Mikey. It's great to see you in the live again. I'm at the stage now, Philip, where I'm starting to see some of my regulars. They're glutton for punishment. Let's see if there's any more people have any questions. Like say the Niall died in 405. Rome was on the ropes. They withdrew completely in 410. Um, yeah, I mean, but there you go. He died in 405. So, if they didn't even leave to 5 years after his death, you've still got the 50 maybe years of his lifespan. So let's say he's rating it at 15, you've 35 years. So, and that's if Niall died in 405. Again,
Yeah.
most of Niall's work, as I said, comes from Murku, the Abbot Murku, his life in the 7th century, which is, at minimum 2 centuries after his death, and is heavily influenced by O'Neills, who are sort of whispering over the shoulder of Armagh Church in making sure that their genealogies are the best.
Yeah. The problem straight away is that the Annals of the Four Masters, the Book of Invasions, and Griffin Keaton's work all kind of go against each. When it comes down to dating these kings and stuff, they kind of, not only are they using terms that are quite funny, because some of these books, if you take Keaton's work, Keaton's not work is until the 17th century. Then you have the Annals of the Four Masters, which is around the 16th, 17th century as well. Even the Book of Invasions made way later on and stuff, and the Book of Armagh, it made hundreds, if not thousands of years after a lot of this happens. And then when you actually compare them, the dates are off on them, so you're dealing with whatever interpretation or sources these people have. Now, if you take Keaton's, for example, and actually read through it, Keaton's has a better interpretation and view than a lot of people have during the 19th century. Like, Keaton's understands what is an Irish Viking, where I have historians from the 19th century. And don't forget now, Keaton's is around the William Knight... the William Knight Jacobite Wars and stuff, and yet Keaton's, in my opinion, from reading his sources and stuff, has a better understanding of what is an Irish Viking than most historians from the 20th century, where they have a very nationalist point of view of, Irish versus the Danish and the Norwegians, Keaton's isn't really buried on that. Keaton's understands what is an Oostman and that, an Irish Viking, where I talk to people today and they don't even know what an Irish Viking is, and they get very worked up from a nationalist perspective because they're quoting from nationalist books without even realizing it. So although Keaton's is a very, very, very educated man for the time, you're dealing with the very limited sources he does have in the period of the William Knight Jacobite Wars. Perhaps he didn't have access to the Annals of the Four Masters. Perhaps he didn't have access to the Book of Invasions. And if he did have access to them, what copy did he have access to? What interpretation did that book have? Because his writing of the kings of Ireland and stuff is the dates are slightly off from other interpretations of books that we have today. So just keep account of that when looking through a lot of this information and stuff. They don't really align completely, so it is very, very difficult to and that's what we have today to work off of, is information that sometimes doesn't really align or has a completely different interpretation depending on their view, their political view at the time, especially when dealing, because even yesterday I had somebody talking about this whole Ireland versus Norway interpretation of the 10th century Ireland, and I was trying to pin down where exactly he's getting his sources from, and eventually I got it over him, and he had a very kind of 20th century interpretation of Ireland versus Norway, and that's not how the medieval period worked at the time. We nationalism is a very modern concept. So just pay attention to that.
Yeah, I've kind of touched on that in my lives before. There are at least 4 main schools of the rise of nationalism and the idea of nationhood, and they all stem pretty much from around the 14th century up to the Industrial Revolution, depending on which school of thought you ascribe to. So even then, whatever you're ascribing to, whether it be the in the 14th century, such as English nationalism and the idea of nationhood happens during the 100 Years' War, England and France. But with the same argument, you can use that with some of the language being used by the church and Brian Boru. So, in the sense, and that's going back to the 11th century. So, well, it's more his grandson, actually, apologies, through his works afterwards, through his propagandist works. So, the invasion of the Wars of the Gaul and the Gael, is it? I can't remember the.
Oh yeah.
So,
But there's the problem with that book straight away is that that's written in the 13th century, and it's Murtagh Breen
yes.
trying to justify his both his kingship and his right to rule Dublin. So you need to remember that it's taken from a 12th century interpretation
That's my point.
around 1103
Yeah, that's my
of
point.
Murtagh Breen.
Yeah, so hang on. Kayla Crush, thanks very much for the gifts. I really do appreciate that. You don't have to gift, but thank you very much. That's my point, is that if you ascribe some of the people who would use the rise of nationalism and the idea of nationhood, and the language they're using and the sources they're using and the language the sources are using, we have the same thing happening in Ireland in the 13th century. Now, nobody's saying that the idea of an Irish state existed in the Irish mindset in the 13th century. The idea of a kingdom of rule, the island being ruled under one kingship, has mythical origins going back centuries, but it's not the idea of Ireland and the nationalism that we see especially arise in the sort of 19th to 20th century, 18th to 20th century. So you don't have that mindset.
You can really see that when James Todd rewrites the War of the Irish and the Foreigners in 1805. He rewrites it to the invasion of Ireland by the Danes and the other Norsemen.
Right, I'm going to leave you do that. I'm going to quickly bow away from the live for 2 minutes. And you keep everyone entertained. Sing them a tune. Keep singing about.
I'm just going to waffle on about the book, the importance of sources, I suppose.
Do it.
But you can see that straight away with the Book of Invasions of Ireland and the Danes and the other Norsemen, dated to around 1805 to 1869. It takes a very, very nationalist interpretation of the previous stuff. Like, it's meant to be a direct translation of the War of the Irish and the Foreigners, and yet when James Todd rewrites the book, his translation is way off. Like, he literally directly translated it to the invasion of Ireland by the Danes and other Norsemen, remembering the fact that this is a nationalist world in the 19th century. To also support that furthermore, when we look at other nationalist book written at the time that's meant to be medieval books, we can take the likes of The History of the Irish State in 1014, written by Alice Green, dated to of 1847 to 1929. Alice writes a very nationalist interpretation of Ireland versus Norway. Again, where if you look at the direct sources, nowhere does it say anything about Ireland versus Norway. And this book is very, very, very outdated. And yet, a lot of people even today, when talking about the Vikings plundering and raiding the monastic settlements of Ireland, continuously reference, without even realizing as well, like the amount of times I've come across people who talk about the Vikings in Ireland, reference the Danes and the other Norsemen, without even realizing that they're quoting from James Todd or Alice Green, The History of an Irish State in 1014. Even if you look at her cover to that book, it's got the capital of London, which highlights the fact that you're dealing with an Ireland inside of the British Empire, a very nationalist Ireland that is fighting, Britain and Ireland that's trying to fight off the Viking invaders from Norway and Denmark. That it's, Britain and Ireland against, Denmark and Norway, because it's fitting in the nationalist interpretation at the time. And then finally, another book that a lot of people are quoting from without even realizing it is The Scholarly Revolution and the Making of the New Ireland. And then that Ian McNeill, whose book is written around the period of 1867 to 1945, also takes a very nationalist interpretation of Ireland, where it takes on kind of a more 200 years of Irish occupation by the Vikings in Ireland. And because of that, a lot of people then, after reading his book, would have a very Ireland versus Norway interpretation of the conflict between the Norsemen and the Gaelic. I think that's a problem a lot of times, especially when people are quoting a lot of this stuff off of me. The only period where you see this kind of Vikings versus kind of Irish interpretation would be very, very early on, between the period of 793 to 820. That's where you get a solid, the Vikings coming in, plundering and raiding the monastic settlements. And even on top of that, it's still very, very complicated, because you're dealing with the likes, as we were talking today, the Kennel Owen, who are trying to keep the island of Ireland decentralised. And then you have the Southern Uí Néill, especially with the rise of the likes of Mael Seachna I, who believe in more of a centralised Ireland of Ireland. And you can see that, by the way, when reading the Book of Armagh, the Armagh clearly supports the Southern Uí Néill's rise in the island. And then on top of that as well, you can also see early on with the Kennel Owen how they support Derry and their continued decentralised Ireland. However, I think Michael pointed out, with the Kennel Owen, it depends on their mood, because sometimes they support Derry and their decentralised Ireland of Ireland, but other times they do actually, in fact, support Armagh and its centralised view of the Ireland. I suppose somebody you should definitely look into is definitely the rise of, if we look at the historical thing, is Niall Glondov's grandson, which is Domhnall Uí Néill, in around 955 to 978, and his rise into the over-kingship of Ireland, which is very, very interesting, because it coincides with the time period of the kings of Dublin really dominating the trade network between York and Dublin. As Claude Downham has pointed out, it looks as though, because of the economics that's going into Ireland at the time and how they were giving that coinage tribute to the Uí Néill at the time, that we're dealing with an economic golden age, which is far different to the interpretation of Ireland we have between the period of 793 to 840, where it does seem to be Viking raiders, going in and plundering and raiding the monastic settlements. That, in fact, when we're dealing with Donald O'Neill's reign around 955 to how we say it, where is it now?
What
I
are
had
you?
it right in front of me.
I heard 952 in Domhnall, so I'm
yeah.
guessing you're talking about his campaigns in Connacht.
Yeah. Well, I was more or less focusing on the idea of centralization versus decentralization, and also our interpretation from a nationalist point of view, that it's in fact much more complicated, especially when we're having tributes going from the Irish Vikings who occupy York at the time, the Hiberno Scandinavians, as the academics referred to them, as the Emer, their kingship in the York territory that they had captured. Their relationship then between 955 to 978, where they would go then into Dublin and then meet in the assemblies itself in both Clonmacnoise and in Tara, and then they would give tribute to Domhnall Uí Néill, which then highlights the fact that we're dealing with a very complicated relationship between the Hiberno Scandinavians, the Norse Gaelic, as some people would refer to them as, and the the Uí Néill, especially with the Kennel Owen, who at one moment they believe and support a decentralized Ireland and are very Gaelic and very anti-foreigners, and then suddenly there's a big switcheroo where they're suddenly believing in more of a centralized interpretation, and on top of that support Armagh's bid for centralized monastic settlements, and on top of that also support the foreigners in the island of Ireland and allowing them to mold and integrate themselves into society, especially at the fact that they're meeting in assemblies to give tribute to them and respect them as over-kings of the island. I think that shows a much more complicated relationship between the foreigners and the Gaelic.
So I'm back now. I needed a coffee because I was losing my voice. But I'm just gonna
I
say anything Philip said. You got to remember he's a monster man. So it's all lies. It's all lies. Just
Oh
I'll
yeah.
edit out the life. Just, if he's
And then Brian Brew came in with his big stick and battered the men of the north.
yeah. I'm gonna. So if you just want to watch this
That's a
again
fact.
on YouTube, the bit where I couldn't monitor him and make sure that he wasn't spouting that monster nonsense, it's been edited out. Don't worry. I'm doing a book of Arma, right? No.
Uh,
So I obviously caught the end of that with Donald Uí Néill, who I believe is the first one to actually use the term Uí Néill. But yeah, he's a rise. I know he's coinciding his rises with Congalach, even of the King of Brega, who was part of another branch of Southern Uí Néill, who were sort of stamping their claim as well. They had been quite a minor sort of faction in the Southern Uí Néill, which I suppose I know Farrell said earlier he'd love to see. Look into maybe have a video on the Southern Uí Néill. I feel like maybe the Northern Uí Néill, like I say, we've only got to the 9th century and there's still quite a lot to go. But if you think that maybe we just start maybe going into the Southern Uí Néill, and then maybe we could do the kingship. The same way the kingship of Tara was, alternate between the two and keep the same timeline. So maybe if we do the ninth up to the 9th century in the next video, whenever you're free, Philip, we can do the
yeah,
9th
yeah.
century at the Southern Uí Néill, and then we come back to the Northern Uí Néill and do this 11th, 12th, 13th century, and then back to the Southern Uí Néill, and maybe we can make a series out of this. Just one second, John, do you look into surnames? I do. So Philip here at Irish Medieval History. I do the surnames of so the families in the area, and what the sort of families were up to, and Philip tends to look at, but he's not averse to looking into families as well. Is that he would look at the wider picture, the dynamics that's happening,
Yeah.
and sort of he would delve into the weeds of the kingdom, whereas I would look at the individual in the kingdom. It's the best way I can sort of split our channel into two,
Yeah.
but we do have a lot of overlap.
I kind of look more into the political side of things, to be quite honest with you, especially with the military side of things.
Yeah.
I think every time Dermot Scully, who's working for History Hit right now, sees me, he always he just like literally just tells me I'm a military historian, and that's that. And I'm like, okay, I'm a military historian.
So that's the way that's actually a perfect way to describe it. So Philip would I would look at who fought at the battle, Philip would look at why the battle was fought and what was happening
Yeah.
in that battle. So that's how I can split our channels into two, but like I say, there's a huge overlap. Philip's been encroaching in my territory recently by doing family surname videos. But I wouldn't watch them because they're terrible. No.
No, definitely not up to your standard, that's for sure. Yeah. The thing is that I don't really, although a lot of academics like Dermot Scully and stuff just blatantly tell me I'm a military historian, I don't, because my channel, I kind of want to keep things as broad as possible, so I don't try to leave people out of the conversation and stuff. You will see me, especially with Rachel and stuff, covering women's history, especially lately. Rachel's been on my channel a lot covering women's history, so definitely jump over to my channel and cover, do a lot of that. And I also cover a lot of clothing as well, but so does Michael. From time to time you'll see him jumping over to cover clothing, you'll see him to cover battles, you'll see him cover family trees and stuff, because we want to have these conversations. We absolutely love these conversations and stuff. So although we'll be put in our little brackets of specializing in the likes of military history or genealogy and stuff, you will see us jumping around the place and covering clothing, covering this and that on the channel. But that's from more of a pop YouTube perspective and stuff. When we do go into our academic fields, we tend to specialize more in the military side of things or the genealogy side of things and stuff. But at the same time, because we're dealing with YouTube and because we're dealing with a what was it? we're dealing with YouTube and we're dealing with, you know, the wider perspective and stuff, you will see us on our channels going out of our sphere of comfort and stuff. And we want you guys to kind of ask those questions and stuff. Do not come onto our channels think, oh, he's only going to talk about military history. He only cares about military history. No, that's not the case at all. I actually love all of it, to be honest with you. That's why we encourage you definitely to come onto our channel and ask questions. Like, if you want to ask a question about family and family ties and stuff, and you're on my history at the time, definitely ask me. You've seen that plenty of times where, you know, people have asked me about the O'Briens and stuff, and I've turned around and given you the information that I can provide. But then when there's stuff that I can't really fully elaborate on, I can easily punch you over to the channel, Clans and Dynasties as well. So we want you and encourage you to ask these questions when we're live and stuff, or even down in the comments section and stuff, because we love the entire topic of not just Irish medieval history, but medieval history as a whole. I like you asking questions to do with Japan, or what's happening in Bohemia, or what's happening in Italy and stuff. It's not my field of expertise, but we like having these conversations, and I think Michael would definitely agree on that.
Yeah, no, as MZG has said there, you know, as one can tell by the numbers, we're desperate for the actual history of our ancestors. Yeah, I mean, the numbers have been wild with my lives. I didn't expect the lives to take off as well as they have. The numbers are a little bit lower because Philip's here, I believe, but I'm not going to correlate that sort of information. You know, it could be a number of factors, but no, you know, it's true. We know that there's a huge yearning for a lot of the diaspora and just people at home. Really wanted to know about Irish history, and the problem is that it's one of the reasons we started these channels was that myself and Philip were sort of sitting here and going, it was being this is nice. It's going back 4 or 5 years. Was that we saw that it was being filled with nonsense. It was being filled with misinformation. It was being filled in with fabrication. And it was just, we thought that it was giving people the wrong idea about Irish history. You know, and we want people to sort of appreciate their history for what it is. And that includes warts and all. You know, it's not always a pretty, you know, pretty place. You know, Ireland did, you know, get involved in slavery in the medieval period. Women weren't treated well. You know, these are topics that, you know, almost... sort of people shirk away from, but you know, it is part of our history, so we should, you know, celebrate it, not celebrate. And now, before any of you get onto Reddit, I did not reference like celebrate slavery, but I'm just saying that you know, we should celebrate the fact that our history, you know, and embrace it, warts and all. So acknowledge it, Kelly. Yeah, that's exactly right. I'm also curious to know, she was a second wife. Oh, you're talking about his supposed Saxon wife during the pagan polygamy. Yeah, we spoke about the polygamy side of things, and you know, his sort of the possibility of a Saxon wife, whether it was you know, Angle, or you know, possibly with links to the Germanic Romano groups in England, etc. So, but yeah, I mean. A good subject to cover are the degrees of Brehon law. Actually, well, he's more of an associate of me, but Philip knows his brother quite well. If you go to Brehon Academy.
I did living history with brother. I don't know, you know more of him, you know, himself. I actually never met him actually, but I do know his brother from the living history sides.
So Brehon
with
Academy,
Fingal and stuff.
I would again. He has an excellent channel on YouTube, and it's more his area of expertise. I would love to learn more about it and do something about it, but again, I'm very wary about going into fields that aren't my area of expertise, purely because. You know, again, it goes back to harkens back to my original point in that we don't want to give misinformation, and that's why we started this in the first place, was to eradicate misinformation. So, you know, can you please give me some information about a surname, please? I often on my lives I will give information on surnames, John. But tonight it's not so much about the surnames and more about the history. But I will try and get some surnames, I suppose, in before. So if you want to put it in the subject, if I can get to it, I promise I'll try. But by and large, we're just sort of generally talking about. Well, it seems to have gone from the O'Neills to just about every topic in Irish history. So it's one of those, one of those. One of those, and this is what always happens when I get Philip on, is that we just end up talking so much history that, I mean, we've had lives that have gone on for absolute hours in the past.
Yeah, it's very true.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking that actually we might continue this, not so much continue the topic of the Kennel Owen into the O'Neills, but actually, if you're free this weekend, we might. We'll talk about it later and stuff, but we might at some stage actually jump over to my channel, because my students and stuff on my classes and stuff have been covering going into the likes of 10th century Ireland and stuff. Sorry, 10th century Ireland. So we might actually focus on a topic around there, depending if we're busy and stuff this weekend. I'll talk about it to Michael a bit later and stuff. So definitely pay attention to my channel. I'll do something anyway this weekend live. So definitely jump over to my channel for this weekend and stuff. Yeah,
I think that's a good time just to plug Philip's channel and just sort of say that he does run history courses. He does have a YouTube channel and TikTok channel, and he's well worth a follow. Irish medieval history. Next time you get on the live, I'll do a better sort of. I'll have the symbol I have that I put on most of my videos underneath on my TikTok especially, so people can see that. But definitely get across to his channels. We'll organize something for the weekend or very soon on your channel. So if any of you are I follow Philip. Thank you, Lisa. I remember you saying you would go across and follow him, so thank you very much for doing that. Like I say, check out his stuff if you want to get more into Irish history. He does a great course, well worth the money. As for my channel, like I said, memberships, I do a memberships live once a month. It's more personalized and where I answer more questions that are more personalized to you and my community, where I would cover these topics and try to tailor them towards yourself. Next month I have the McDonoughs, which was requested by Lisa here, amongst other families. So like I say, once a month membership lives, so please think about subscribing to the memberships. Every bit helps and turns us into something hopefully bigger than what it is. But even I'm so grateful for the opportunities that's been given here. So I think we will end the live. I will just, because before I quickly go, I will just give the two names. So I know that Gaelic, because since you gifted, I feel it'd be wrong to not tell you that Hamels can be found in they're primarily found around where the O'Hanlons were, in Erchiela or Oriel, Monaghan, and they are noted as being sort of linked to the O'Neills. And John, you were saying about the Sheridans again, and you were saying about Cavan, which is actually pretty close to their original homeland, which is around Longford, and their earners. I actually have a video coming out soon, but the amount of research that it needs is every earner family in Ireland and the churches are associated with. It's going to be the biggest single location for all these surnames in one area. And earners were a landed family within the church, which I will go into more. So I'm just sort of finishing up the research of that right now. And the Sheridans will appear in that, John. So, but I think we should maybe end the live there. I've taken Philip's time up too much, and there's only so much of me he can take. So I will end the live here, and I will see you all soon. Thanks very much for tuning in, and thank you very much for the gifts again. I really appreciate it. Thank you for all the likes. And we will leave that. So thanks very much, guys. And now it just takes the 5 minutes to find out how to turn these off.